So getting to like new micro-ATX cases is becoming easier and easier. Just because the micro-ATX hardware is becoming more widely available, our choices for enclosures is becoming just so vast. So like, how do you choose the right one? And here we have the new Gamdias M4M. I have not reviewed anything from them before, but this thing looks promising. Gamdias. Sounds like a weird gaming brand, doesn't it? We have two models available, wood and RGB, both at $79, which is awesome. So there's no price discrimination, whether you want to go for a flashy presentation or a more, I would say, mature look with the walnut wood at the bottom in front of the I/O. I'm glad these are affordable too, because you don't necessarily want to compromise on the price when you're trying to downsize. And on my desk space, these fit in no problem, although I do prefer the wood model over the RGB. But design-wise, this thing is mostly consistent with the same ventilation pattern on the outside as on the inside. Some curves at the top as well to keep things away from the boring standard rectangle. And also the interior is actually pretty decent in its capabilities for housing awesome large hardware, including actual space behind the motherboard for cable management. That was the problem with my previous micro-ATX enclosures, including the AP201 from ASUS and the A3 from Lee & Lee. Packaging could be improved. We got the walnut wood. Packaging definitely could be improved. This is very strange because the box isn't actually damaged on the sides. I mean, like, it feels like it might have taken a hit here, but like the actual paper isn't even... This is pretty severe. Ouch. This is just a panel. Okay, it looks like just a panel. Okay, packaging could definitely be improved. Now, may I remind you some advantages of going with micro-ATX. You don't have to house the computer underneath the desk because the footprint and volume is definitely much smaller versus your traditional mid-tower. Therefore, it can easily fit on your desk beside the monitor without appearing like too giant and without the traditional hassle that you have to deal with when it comes to ITX enclosures, where cable management is difficult, cooling might have some compromises. Here with micro-ATX, especially with cases that would properly support a 360 I/O, like, it might become a no-brainer for many people. And 33 liters might not sound like a drastic downsize, but it is a huge downsize when you compare it to like a traditional mid-tower. 33 liters. Now, generally, I would say don't be afraid of keeping the case on some sort of pedestal or a moving platform underneath the desk, but the I/O placement with the M4M would make that difficult. It's right at the front, at the bottom, so this thing has to be right in reach on your desk only. The most impressive thing about this thing are the specs, actually. So you can do a 360 at the top. They say you can do a 360 at the bottom, but that's highly not recommended because the pump would be higher than the radiator. So you can probably just do regular fans at the bottom for additional intake for your GPU. You do have dual 120mm fans included at the front, and it will support a radiator in here too, although probably not with a 360 at the top or the bottom. And we have an exhaust fan at the back that is 120, which is also included. This case will support nice beefy tall CPU coolers up to 175mm and massive GPUs up to 395mm. So my TUF 5080 fits no problem, with lots of room to spare to the front. If you are mounting a radiator here, that would be just fine, and it will support ATX power supplies up to 150mm. I always appreciate built-in anti-sag brackets for our graphics card. We'll see how it works later. The front I/O cables are cleanly routed to the back directly as to not interfere with anything at the bottom. Unfortunately, the top bracket is not removable. This would have made installation of your 360s way easier, especially because we are already kind of crowded in this space with the ATX power supply and your micro-ATX motherboard right underneath. At least our front fans are easily accessible by removing the front panel. Now, unfortunately, the exterior panels are thin and flimsy, really easy to flex, and because they are on push pins, once they're kind of like out of shape, the push pins become a little bit misaligned and becomes more challenging to actually close the damn panel. And the dust filters included here are garbage dust filters. I hate them. They're not as easy to take off, first of all, and they're more of a restrictive mesh than anything else. And I would advise against running the case naked without any mesh, just because the perforation here is nice and chunky, good for airflow, but not going to catch any dust. Installing the front filter back is kind of difficult already, but just keep in mind that you have to insert with the curvature facing the correct way. Now on this side of the enclosure, we actually have space behind the motherboard for cables. We even have a storage bracket for SSDs or hard drives that covers our open CPU cutout, so swapping out coolers would not be a problem. The RGB version actually comes with a fan hub for 8 fans and 8 RGB devices, which is absolutely insane, and I am so thankful for that. The wood version does not have the fan hub, which is kind of unfortunate, but at least all the fans are already daisy chained into a single 4-pin, so you can plug that directly into your motherboard. Interestingly, the RGB version has a single RGB fan in the back, but the front fans are your standard black. I do like this little door below the power supply so that all the cables can be bunched up over here, and you can simply close the door, and so you can compress those cables and close the side panel properly. In case you are wondering, the feet are removable, and on that note, let's build. Honestly, the entire experience is pretty normal, except for all the cabling that you have to do because of the RGB fans. I installed 3 extras, and just the nightmare that was happening around the hub was not my cup of tea. I prefer just to close the panel and forget about it. You can still do all the cable management just fine though, because you have a lot of space behind the motherboard, and that is one of the biggest advantages behind this enclosure versus the previous similar sized mATX cases that I've reviewed. My biggest compliment for the M4M is actually hardware compatibility and overall user experience, because my giant 5080 fit no problem, my 360 at the top fit no problem, the 3 fans I installed at the bottom was pretty easy to route in terms of passing the cables to the back of the motherboard. Managing the cables from the power supply is easy, it's just managing the fan cables and additional lighting cables, that's when it becomes kind of a nightmare. I also feel like all the components inside have good breathing room, and when it comes to breathing, those stupid dust filters are definitely my enemy, and removing the front panel, you can see the case has a lot of breathing room potential. The CPU temperature with the front panel off are pretty significantly lower compared to your stock configuration, right? And my other big complaint is the build quality of the exterior panels. Like, the main frame is fine, but everything on the exterior that you handle, for example, removing the top panels, it has way too much flex on it. Removing the front panel, it bends way too easily, which is how maybe that shipping damage happened. But the good news, because these pieces are so flexible, you can simply bend them back in shape. Now, in my search for other mATX competition, I've stumbled upon the Phanteks XT3, which looks really similar to the M4M in terms of the interior specifications, how the power supply is installed. It does have different exterior looks and different ventilation pattern, but the two cases look really, really similar. The Phanteks one seems to be slightly larger, about 40 liters. They're not exactly identical, but they're very close. And on that note, I would love to hear if you guys are planning a mATX build anytime soon, and why. Because I feel like it's getting quite popular. We have way more options now than we did just a few years ago, even though I feel like the mATX motherboard scene is still kind of the same, but the cases are definitely rising. All right, guys, I'm Dmitry. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you in the next video.